Tolerators, this is To All the Men I've Tolerated Before with Natalie, your weekly look at everyday misogyny. Today's guest is Amanda Kippert. Amanda is a co-host of the podcast Toxic, an award-winning journalist, domestic violence advocate, and editor-in-chief of the national nonprofit DomesticShelters.org. She is here today to talk about domestic violence advocacy and reporting on domestic violence. Thanks for connecting, Amanda, and thanks for being here.
You're so welcome. That was a great intro.
Thank you. I try my best.
It's so weird when you hear somebody else tell your shit about you. You know, you're like, wow.
And I'm a big advocate of reading the intros live because it makes the people smile, and other people are like, don't waste their time like that. Read them before, or read them after post. And I'm like, people love compliments. And if you don't think that people need more compliments, that's the patriarchy.
Everything is the patriarchy.
Everything is the patriarchy. I just had the luxury and the joy of being on an episode of Toxic, but tell the listeners about Toxic and how it came to be.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we were so happy to have you on. Toxic is a podcast that kind of grew out of my frustrations of, as a journalist, I need to keep it under wraps, you know, because we need to report the news as it is, blah, blah, blah. And I try to do that the best I can. But it's hard sometimes when you report on the same thing over and over, which is men killing women, and there's not really a space for you to rant about that besides to your friend group or your spouse or whatever, which they do that after a while. So I began Toxic 2 years ago with my best friend Jenna because we wanted a space where we could talk openly and honestly about toxic masculinity, patriarchy, violence against women, all these things, and have this opinion about it, which is all of this sucks, and we need to discuss it more. We need to bring it to light more. And I wanted to do that without the restraints of, reporting on it, which is a different vehicle altogether.
I think it's amazing that in 2023, we don't have more safe circles to just be like, hey, misogyny sucks. Have you heard?
Yeah, I know. It's true because the real honest opinion is, it does suck and it's prevalent and it's an epidemic and women are dying every single day at the hands of their partners who they love and trust. And we just have to report on it as, well, another woman has died and we think it's domestic violence. Well, no shit, it's domestic violence, Like, for fuck's sake. Like, that's kind of, it's one of those, like, moments where you sometimes feel like you're screaming into a crowded room and no one's turning around. That's how a lot of times it feels like reporting for the last 10 years on domestic violence. It feels like that a little bit. You just keep thinking, I'm telling the same sort of story over and over again. Is anything changing? Is anyone picking this up,
Well, and then it's amazing because you would think women being treated like people, or women getting to walk down the street safely, trans women, women of color, non-binary humans, just getting to wake up every day and go, I bet you I won't be killed in my car just because I'm who I am. Wouldn't it be such like a political stance? Like, what platform is that on the political spectrum of like, we believe that women and non-cis men people are people? But we live in such a volatile world and political climate right now that should you even approach the subject of, hey, I didn't feel very respected as a person right there, and I feel like it has something to do with the fact that I'm a woman, well, then you might as well burn the building down. Burn the building down. You upset everyone.
Right. You are emotional. Are you menstruating? Like, what's happening right now that has forced you to say your feelings out loud? You need to keep those under wraps.
And it makes it so that you go, I guess I just won't tell my toxic boss that he doesn't get to call me sweet baby every morning. I guess I will just sit there and I will be his sweet baby, because if I tell him, hey dude, calling me sweet baby in the office, not a vibe, then all of a sudden it's like, I can't believe that you're trying to make me out to be the Joker and Batman. And it's like, oh, no one villainized you, but you. So that makes me feel like you've thought nasty thoughts about me because you've classified yourself as a villain.
And like the least worst thing is that you might get demoted or fired, and the worst thing is that you might get killed for sharing those feelings. And I feel like that's a lot of women feel like that. It's like, I could speak up or I could stay alive. So I guess I'll just stay quiet. And that's the culture that we have created and reinforced for women to feel trapped between a rock and a hard place constantly. You know, either I stick up for myself or I and then I risk my life, or I stay quiet, but then I risk all of my dignity, my ethics, my self-worth.
Mm-hmm. And they still tell us that we're very hyperbolic if I go, well, I didn't tell him that it was inappropriate to put his hand on my thigh every time my husband, and his wife went out to dinner, because all I could think about is, I don't know him like that. He could be Ted Bundy, because Ted Bundy was also a very good looking, charismatic dude who told women about puppies in his van and got them to help him out or something.
He was the real world Joe from You, which we were just talking about on Toxic. We went down a You spiral.
He truly was. And then people are like, not every man is a killer. And it's like, realistically, I understand that not every man has the will, the energy, or honestly the gumption to try and kill me. I know. Mm-hmm. But I also don't get the luxury to assume that you're not going to kill me, because that's how I end up dead.
Right. I forgot who it was, but somebody made the comparison of, men and guns. If you ever pick up a gun, the first rule of gun safety is what? To pretend like a gun is loaded. Not pretend, but assume a gun is loaded, I should say. And that's how you handle a gun, to make sure that you don't accidentally shoot yourself or someone else. And it's the same way with women and men. You have to assume that every man could possibly have fantasies of killing you. And that's the only way that you will stay on guard. Because you don't know which ones it is. I mean, it could be any of them.
It could be. And I think that also boils down to the way that we as women are taught about how to behave should we end up on the street with a stranger who means to harm us. And the trick of my trade was to be told, you have to yell fire, because if you yell rapist, no one's going to want to deal with that. And I'm like, oh.
My God.
People will only care about me if I'm on fire, but not if a man is chasing me with a knife.
It's entirely a possible scenario. I can't imagine that someone would ignore the word rape, but I wouldn't be surprised.
But there's been so much I think, especially being raised by my parents' generation and with living grandparents, it was like they knew exactly whose neighbors were having, like which neighbors were having domestic violent nights. And it was all like, you know what, they'll work it out. You don't have to call anybody. It's not getting too loud. They'll work it out. That's their house. That's their house and that's their business.
I mean, for the longest time, domestic violence has been considered, a couple's issue. That's what it's called, domestic violence. It's a domestic issue. It's between two people. So, by even calling it domestic violence, it assumes it's like the term abusive relationship, which kind of also irks me when I see that, especially written in media. Is like, it's not an abusive relationship because that insinuates that both parties had a part in that, and it's a relationship with an abusive partner, because one person is abusive, one person is a victim. So, but yeah, for the longest time historically, it was just always kind of looked the other way at. Well, if they're married, then it's a different thing, which boggles my mind, because if someone broke into your house and started beating you with a baseball bat, and you called 911, the police would be there in a second, that person would be arrested, you'd be taken to the hospital. But if it's your husband who's doing it, well, did you do something? Were you both fighting? Did you fight back? If you fought back, well, then you might also be abusive. So instead of being a victim, now you might also be arrested. Can you guys work it out? I'll take him around the block. He'll cool off. I'll send him back home. Like, what? Just because you've signed a paper declaring that you are legally married. All the laws should be open.
every once in a while I tell people, I'm like, that piece of paper is awfully dangerous for how much you want it. But I realized that on Toxic, you asked me what I thought one of the biggest tools against misogyny and the patriarchy was. And I just thought of it right now, another one right now, while you were going through that. It's TikTok. Because how many times do you turn on TikTok and it's a woman who has posted her ring camera video and it's, I called the cops on my boyfriend because he was getting violent with me. I had locked myself in the bathroom. They showed up, heard his smooth talking ass be like, I came home and I may have called her a bitch or whatever, but then she shoved me against the wall to get out of the apartment, and now I'm sitting in a squad car. And I'm like, it's TikTok. TikTok is our number one weapon now against these things, not just being things that are like, oh, but people make that up. People are dramatic. It's like, no, it's on video.
Right. Video has become one of the most powerful tools to prove women's innocence, which is crazy because we have to have it on video to show that women are innocent. When statistically, that's why I say I believe survivors, full stop. And then when the whole Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation occurred, we had a lot of pushback, especially on social media with Toxic, where people were, the Johnny Depp supporters were coming after us for saying, if you believe survivors, full stop, why would you not believe Johnny Depp? And I say, well, because statistically, men are far, far more likelier to be the abusive partners, and women are more likely to be accused of something called mutual abuse, which doesn't even exist, which is just a fancy word for self-defense or an emotional reaction to years, weeks, months of abuse. So that is why I should clarify that I believe women full stop, And it's not that I don't believe that men can be survivors. We've interviewed some on Toxic, and I've talked to many male survivors, but it's just there's so few and far between that when there are two people who are being accused of abuse, we have to look at the man first and foremost. We just do, because that is just far more likely to be true. And there's hardly ever a relationship where both the man and the woman are abusive at the same time. There's usually one main perpetrator of that abuse. So to say that, like, I've got it on video, it's a woman's number one tool. That's why we always encourage women survivors to record everything they can, video, audio, as long as they can do it in a way that ensures their safety, right?
Yeah. Well, and recording it is not a new concept, because every show that I've ever watched that deep dives into either it's a documentary or it's an episode of Snapped or it's an episode of SVU, the first thing they do is ask you, did you take pictures of the bruises? And then you're like, oh, I just have to be a photographer after I hold the bloody rack to my head? And they're like, well, yeah, we're just not going to believe you. Did you take a photo? And the thing about, and I'm sure working in journalism, you can probably empathize with this too. When it came down to the Johnny Depp and the Amber Heard thing, I was like, we've lost all semblance of nuance to every situation. Every experience is very different and very nuanced. So I'm sure that there were dark and dreary days for both of them, but I'm sure that someone perpetuated someone's more darker and drearier days.
Someone was driving that train.
And when we did a Patreon episode on Amber Heard and Johnny Depp with Jules from Pop Culture Makes Me Jealous, because we knew that we had a lot of feelings, and we knew that a lot of those feelings would come, at least from my side, out very comedic and nonchalant, because I am a broken and messy person. And I was like, oh, better behind a paywall where, like, people who are already on our side will be like, that Natalie cracking a joke in that moment was tacky. I remember finding out where it was like, it's so, the way that our culture will straight up tell women, no, that didn't happen to you. But also, on the flip side, create an entire channel whose entire budget and income depends on survivor stories, and it shows like Snapped, or I Shouldn't Be Alive, or My Abusive Ex-Husband, whatever is on We and Lifetime right now, movies with Tori Spelling, getting shoved by her high school boyfriend. So we put money towards being like, this is a problem. Women kill their husbands because they hit them. We have an entire 15-year show about it. But then also being like, it can't be that big of a deal, though.
I know. Well, I mean, because we pick and choose our victims, right? It's the idea of the perfect victim, so-called perfect victim, where it's if you are a victim the same way that culture expects you to be a woman, which is quiet, subservient, not too emotional, then society is more likely to believe you. Amber Heard was the opposite of that, right? She fought back. She spoke out. She threatened him, and it's like, oh, we don't believe her as a victim anymore because she did these things that step outside of what our boundaries, our borders are for a victim.
Yeah, she wouldn't cry on the stand, and I'm like, well, eventually you stop crying. Just eventually, you're just like, I don't have any more tears to give to Johnny. You just close yourself off to it because Johnny keeps planning matching outfits for the courtroom for the two of you and being friends with all of the bailiffs.
Right.
When we were having our first initial chat, I think I disclosed to you that the violence that I have experienced in relationships has never been physical, nor has it ever been sexual assault, but it is very hard to come to terms with and then communicate to other people about the ways that you've been mentally and emotionally abused. Because again, those types of abuse are just not as clear cut, or you can't take a Polaroid of like the bruise on your brain.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot harder to not necessarily disclose, but prove non-physical types of domestic violence. Even some types of physical domestic violence, though, like strangulation is a big one. Strangulation is the number one lethality indicator, meaning that if you are strangled by an abusive partner, you're in a very lethal situation. Their next step is likely going to be homicide. But strangulation doesn't always leave visible marks. Sometimes you have bruising on the neck, but not always. And the insidious thing about it is that it can cause a traumatic brain injury. So then you have these other effects that aren't necessarily, again, visible to the outside eye, but you have, brain fog, you have memory loss, you have dizziness, headaches, you have like mental health issues that arise from that. And to try to prove that it's really, really difficult.
There's also, and like anything, there's a spectrum to strangulation. So when people think of strangulation, they think of like the two hands on the neck squeezing. But then there's also like the fun trick of I'm pressed up against the wall and your arm is against my neck. That is also a very personal way to try to be doing me harm.
Mm-hmm. And there's suffocation too, using a pillow over a victim's mouth and nose. Yeah, all of those situations. If you've ever been in them, a lot of victims that I have spoken to who have been strangled before will say, I lost consciousness for a moment, but then I came back to being conscious, I guess, and I didn't feel any after effects. The crazy thing about that, though, is the effects can happen weeks later. So, who's listening, who's ever been strangled, to receive medical attention no matter what, because those effects can be delayed.
When you're working with victims and you're advocating for them, what are the types of, when they are speaking to you, what is it that they're looking for help for? Is it having someone be there while they're reporting? Is it help finding a legal team? What are some of the ways that advocacy happens between an advocate and a domestic violence survivor?
Sure. Well, when I say advocate, I advocate for survivors through the work that I do on domesticshelters.org as a journalist and an editor there. But I've also volunteered with the local domestic violence shelter in my city on their helpline for about a year to get more experience directly with victims. And I feel like the main thing that survivors are looking for is validation, to say, this is happening to me, but I'm not entirely sure that I'm in danger. I'm not entirely sure that this is abuse, because it's really hard sometimes for survivors to admit to themselves that this person that they let into their life or their home or that they married is actually someone who is planning their eventual murder. I mean, that's a really hard thing to wrap your mind around, because that is where a lot of abuse will escalate to if it doesn't reach a boundary or cutoff point. So advocacy to me looks like validating survivors. I believe you 100%. What happened? I believe that that happened to you. I believe that you're scared, and I believe that you deserve better. And you do. And, the next step after that is, what does that look like to you? Because safety doesn't always look like, well, get out of the house now, because they have children or they have pets or they're financially dependent on this abuser, or they are, medically dependent on this abuser. Well, I can't leave because I have nowhere to go and I need help, So what does safety look like to you? What can we provide? And it's got to be survivor led in terms of, what that person needs. That would be my biggest piece of advice to anybody who's ever had a friend or a loved one disclose domestic violence to them. What can I do for you right now that will help you? Instead of saying, I think you should do this, because then you're just taking the place of that abuser by saying, you need to leave now. You need to do ABC.
Yeah. Well, because me deciding that I know what's best and going like, well, I know you should blah, 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 or leave his ass, or kick him to the curb, or whatever, that I know when that happens to me and someone tries to tell me what I'm going to do, that kicks in all of the defiant chemicals in my body. And I'm like, or will I just make it work? Because now I've decided that I want to spite you. Like, it puts me on the defense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely can. And which is why, as an advocate, it needs to be survivor led to say, you have all the power. You know when it's safest to leave, and you know when you're most in danger. So you need to tell me, like, because it's like, I've spoken to survivors who say, I know that this person is bad. I know that they're abusive, but I'm not leaving until my children are in college, because if I leave before then, he says that he's going to take full custody of them. And I don't want that to dissuade anyone from leaving an abusive partner, because it's one of the main reasons that women stay. It's because they're afraid that their abuser will get custody of their children, which is unfortunately reality in so many cases, and it shouldn't be. But you have to also take into account, like, what will keep you alive, what will keep you safe.
The child and the pet thing is always so very difficult for me, because it's like, well, yeah, I've brought other living things into this situation, and they too have to get out with me. Sally Field taught us that in the 70s or 80s. Not without my daughter, not without my cat.
I remember that movie. Not Without My Daughter. I didn't see the Not Without My Cat version.
Well, I think it's just in my head. The fact that I have a very needy cat who's very codependent, to me means that oftentimes I'm like, I can't go to Europe. What would she do if she had to ride on a plane? So, imagine if she was a baby.
Luckily, a lot of shelters now do work with animal shelters. So survivors should know that a lot of times shelters will have either a partnership where they will board your animal for free until you can find a safe place to live, or some shelters, not all, but I'm glad that more and more shelters are doing this, to have a shelter on site. The same domestic violence shelter also has an animal shelter there. Your animal might not be able to stay with you just because of other clients' allergies and things like that, but hopefully they'll be on the same campus.
Yeah, I love that lovely change. And I did just recently see on Facebook that one of my local animal shelters was asking for an immediate emergency foster because of an emergency domestic violence situation. So reach out to the animal people. They are always wanting to make sure that animals get to stay with their people and also get to stay with their people safely. We have another fickle foe on to all the men I've tolerated before. It just doesn't end at misogyny. There's also this bitch capitalism. Have you heard? Who doesn't do a really great job of supporting anyone who isn't Jeff Bezos or Joe Rogan. So when you say things like, I'm medically dependent on him, we're not a country with universal health care, I'm financially dependent on him, I went through the unemployment system, and I went through during a national emergency and global pandemic, so it was a tad bit better, but it wasn't better for everybody, and it certainly wasn't enough for everyone to live off of. There are these innate cultural political structures in place that have made me feel like I'm stuck in a toxic job. So if I feel like I'm stuck in a toxic job, there are probably countless people who feel like they're stuck in a toxic home, in an abusive home, just because we don't naturally offer aid in this country. Do you know, how do you combat that? Where do we combat that on the ground level?
I mean, I think the first step is to reach out to your local resources, because there's going to be more resources there than you might realize, that are not always advertised for help with that. So a lot of people assume that, well, I'm just screwed, right? I'm trapped. This person, I need their health insurance in order to survive, or I'm disabled in some way and they're the only person that can help me get around. I'm blind, or I'm hearing impaired, or I need insulin, or etc., etc., right? I think that you have to prioritize your safety over those long-term needs, and immediately reach out to like your local domestic violence shelter that has advocates on staff. Usually all of them have a 24-hour helpline, or you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline and they will direct you. But there's always going to be, I truly believe, and I hope that I'm not wrong in saying this, but I think that there's always going to be a way out as long as you keep searching. The shitty part is that women need to be their own advocates, their own lifesavers, their own superheroes in this scenario. No one is going to sweep in and do it all for you. I wish that there was. I wish that there was like a superhero team of women that just came in and just like, we got this. But right now in our culture, that's not how it is. And I just think that you have to find that out. But there are I've met so many good people and good organizations that are out there ready and willing to help survivors escape. And unfortunately, I've heard, several stories from survivors of like, but I called this local organization and they said they couldn't help me. They said that their shelter was full. They said that they couldn't take me, then try the next one. You got to keep going. Try the next one. Try the next city over. Try the next zip code over. Just don't give up, because your life is absolutely worth it. But it's true, the healthcare system that we have today is not advantageous for people who are facing medical issues, but also trapped in that scenario where they don't have a lot of options for capital.
Yeah, I think that's always very important to point out, because I don't know about toxic, but to all the men I've tolerated before, it likes to get a lot of YouTube comments from privileged men going, I don't understand why you think you have it that bad. And it's like, well, buddy, I might not have it very bad today because I'm in a lot of advocacy for myself and I'm pretty healthy, have funding coming in or whatever. But because I live in America, that could all be gone one day, and then I am just stuck in whatever my shitty circumstance is.
I know, exactly. And not most of us, I don't know if that statistic is true. Many of us are literally a paycheck away from being homeless, right? It's that one paycheck difference. If we lost our job and we don't have a savings account, like that's it. So just because someone looks like they have everything together doesn't mean that they aren't on like a precarious edge right there that we should take for granted, or we should assume that we know what's going on. I was a media director at a food bank for many years in my past life, and I used to hear a lot of criticism about people who would roll up for the food drive for the weekly food distribution in an expensive looking car. And you just think, but you don't know. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know if they bought that when everything was good and now everything's bad. You can't assume.
During my several bouts of unemployment since the pandemic threw my life for a loop, there have been times where I have said out loud, well, I don't know, I guess I should hide the robot vacuum because I don't want to hear shit from family, friends, or whatever when they come to visit and they're like, well, why do you have a robot vacuum? I thought you didn't like your job enough to keep it, or I thought you were still searching for a job, or something like that. And another podcaster who I really admire from Celebrity Book Club, her name is Chelsea Devantez, and she grew up in a situation where she's like, people really don't understand poor because you can always get something. There are always ways to get a thing. It might not always be sustainable food, but you can always get a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love that robot vacuum as the qualifier for whether or not you're making it.
Thank you. It was the first purchase I made during my COVID unemployment because when you have to sit in your house for hours a day by yourself and you have a long-haired cat, you truly realize how much you ignore when you're a working person who gets to leave their house. And then I was just like, is this what you do all day? You just make mini cats to just roll around my uncarpeted home?
I know, it's like tumbleweeds of pet hair. Now, listen, I've got 2 cats, 2 dogs, and there are 1 woman, 2 girls living in this house that all have long hair. So the amount of hair in this house is insane.
Yeah, there's such a privilege to safety that I think that we don't talk about. We don't talk about how everyone in our country deserves safety. They deserve food. They deserve health care. They deserve a place to sleep that isn't on a park bench in the cold. And instead, we've fostered this really great capitalistic, misogynistic, ableist mindset of, you have to earn your safety. And it's like, oh, I didn't ask to be born. Why do I have to earn it?
Well, I mean, that's the reality for women in a misogynistic culture. You have to prove your worth, right? Because women have long been considered less than men, and so we're long promoted to be caretakers. Our job on earth is to take care of others. So yeah, if you step out of that role, you better prove that you earned it.
And I think there's also a safety in believing that the systems that are out there are actually out there to do us good. So when it comes to this great little hot topic of my abortion rights being taken away that I love to scream about on the internet all the time, it's like, well, my reproductive rights being taken away is another tether that I could have to poverty. It could be another tether I could have to inadequate health care or to an abusive partner, because now you've taken away an amount of advocacy that I have to make a choice about that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the abortion rights thing is, this is not a new thought. And we've ranted about this on Toxic before. It has nothing to do with babies. It has to do everything with power and control over women. If we allow women to make their own choices about their bodies, what's next? Do they get to make their own choices about marriage, about divorce, about relationships, about who they serve and who they don't serve? Like, we can't let it get that far out of control. Like, to keep that nuclear family idea of 1 woman, 1 man, and then babies, it keeps everything kind of neat and tidy and controlled. So, abortion is just the lack of, or the restriction of abortion rights is men's attempt to have this power and control over women. Otherwise, if it was about babies, of course we would fight for all the rights of babies after they're born. We would fight for the reduction of poverty. We would fight for better education. We would fight for more resources for single mothers who have to have these babies and then the fathers disappear. But we don't fight for any of that. We just want women to be pregnant.
That's right. And my radical ass was like, if you want me to have a baby, you have to feed that baby. And then all of a sudden they're like, you should have made better choices. And then I have to volley back with, you won't give me really great birth control options that don't ravage my body. And then they're like, that's still on you, slut. And I'm like, well, this is why men aren't allowed to ejaculate near me anymore.
It really does boil down to women's sexuality and women taking control of their sexuality. Women want to be able to have control of that. It starts as far back as that, really. When women say, but I want to have sex without procreating. Well, that's insane. You can't have sex for enjoyment. That's just what men get to do, not women.
And I think there's also this mindset that we get into where the scary guys are just the 12 guys who are on a season of SVU. When in actuality, misogyny is bad for men, believe it or not, and they are living in a culture that breeds almost violence to be in their minds. And there are a lot of guys who can have that violence in their minds and do nothing with it, and hooray to them. But boom, I will be caught off guard because I will be on a date with someone or out with a friend that I've known for years, and it's getting worse either because I'm picking up on it easier now because I'm constantly talking about misogyny and I'm constantly pissed off about abortion and women's safety and all of it. Or my second theory is that one day they all woke up a little bit more fragile, and it happened maybe on the eve of them taking our abortion rights away, and they were like, hey, everyone, they might start getting power, everyone. And then, like, they just became angrier or resentful towards us. But I will be out with my male friends or partners, and there will be a look that comes over their face or a laugh. It's a laugh that has a certain sound to it, and I'm like, oh, that's your you'd rather hit me laugh, but you know that it's not socially acceptable to. So instead, you're going to do a fake laugh, and that's your way of like tampering it down.
That you'd rather hit me laugh. Wow. Yeah. I think women can identify with that.
And I've been telling more people about the secret you'd rather hit me laugh because I'm like, what if I'm paranoid? What if the podcast has finally gotten to me and it's like, Natalie can't see men without seeing a smack coming to the face? But then, like you, when I say something like, every once in a while, a man that we're with will look at me with such resentment, I know he'd rather me not be in the room, possibly the planet, but he also knows that he'll get canceled if he says it out loud, so he's not going to say it.
He just does the laugh. Yeah, I've definitely faced something similar to that before. You know, I remember when I was at like a some sort of a dinner party thing, and we were kind of going around, everyone was saying what they were doing, what they did with their life, what they do with their life, what I did. And it got to me, and I was talking about, well, I'm a journalist, I cover domestic violence, and it was crickets. You know, it was a mostly male table. So I just think that, like, literally they didn't know what, like, they're not gonna be like, cool, because I feel like they were like, well, I'm the problem, right? So like, you probably hate men, and you know, so it was just crickets. And then there was a woman next to me, and she went on to talk about how she is an Instagram influencer who posts about fashion, and the table just exploded in conversation. Oh my god, it's so and these are adult males, like we're all in our 40s, so it's not like, you know. And she had her husband next to her. They're like, oh, how do you do that? How do you get into that? It's so cool, you know. And I just thought, because that topic is so much easier to digest, because we don't want to talk about the thing that I do because you don't want to implicate your guilt in it in any way, shape, or form, even though that's not what I'm implying. It's just like, it's such an uncomfortable topic sometimes for men to talk about, when I'm like, this is the thing that we need men to actually join the conversation in more of, you know. But a lot of men, I shouldn't say all of them, because there's some great male allies on our side, but a lot of men are just like, I can't even touch that because I don't want to be blamed, you know. But I feel like it holds a lot of similar parallels to white people saying, but I'm not racist, you know, but I have black friends. It's like men like, but I'm not an abuser. I have a wife, I love her, I respect her. Yeah. But dude, it's your cohorts, you know. I might not be racist, but I benefit from a system, you know, as a white woman that puts people of color in a disadvantaged place. So I need to speak up for those people who are in a place that may not have the same voice or the same amplification that I do.
One time, a friend, to eat, probably not to ease my nerves, probably to get ahead of the joke that I was about to make, said, don't worry, I wasn't one of the frat guys that did like anything weird during parties. And he really thought he had me because he had already cut off the conversation there. And I just leaned in and I went, but how many of your buddies did you watch slip pills into a girl's drink? And then I watched him turn as white as a ghost, because that also implicates you, buddy. If you watched it and you didn't walk that girl home, or you didn't give her an Uber, or you didn't tell your guy that your dude that he was a motherfucker and a sicko, then you too are living as part of my problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And all it takes is a man to say, like, yeah, that was me. Like, I am part of the problem. How can I be part of the solution? You have to cross that ego threshold to get to that place of allyship and be like, yeah, I can admit, I am part of the problem. What can I do now? I'm here.
I have to live in a town where I fully know that I could walk into a bar, do a sweep, and know that I could be getting into an altercation with Brock Turner because his daddy bought him out of prison, and then they let him move back into basically my neighborhood. So anywhere I could be, Brock Turner could be there too. And then I'm not enjoying my life because instead I'm just watching what he's doing and making sure everyone else is safe.
Oh my God, that's terrifying. It's terrifying.
I know. It's real cute. It's real cute. And luckily, Facebook tells me every move he makes, so maybe I'll never be in the same bar with him. But it's not going to be good for him the night that I am.
Like, he posts every move?
No, the internet basically.
Is there like a Brock Turner watch group?
Basically, if you like any Facebook page that I like that is dating related, they basically dox his every move. It was actually a moronic choice to move back here because if the man can go to a movie, I doubt he can enjoy it because someone's going to tag their location and be like, heads up, Turner's here.
Wow. That's strong. I mean, I admire that for that watch group. I mean, if he thinks he can just live free and clear, like, man.
I was wondering this today, and I actually added it to my outline. Are you going to cover the Tubi Super Bowl scandal on Toxic? And what a misdirect that... Oh, have you not heard?
No, what is the Tubi Super Bowl?
Yeah, this is my favorite part of being on TikTok, is that I get to be aware. I didn't watch the Super Bowl. I watched Rihanna's pregnancy announcement, and then I went home. I didn't see I saw the Clueless commercial because it somehow ended up on my Instagram feed the Friday before the Super Bowl. But I got on TikTok, and my fun side of TikTok is usually the, well, this fucking happened side of TikTok. And I guess Tubi devised this commercial where it made you believe that the Super Bowl was back, like it was back on. And then all of a sudden, across your screen, it looked like someone had taken the remote and decided to turn on the notebook using the Tubi app. And then women were taking to TikTok and being like, you don't know how many women and children I know that were screamed at, hit, thrown out of their homes that night because some man got really pissed that he might miss 15 seconds of the Super Bowl.
What? Oh my God, I had not heard about this. That's insane. Did Tubi respond?
I don't think Tubi I think right now people are like, well, it's not Tubi's fault that people are abusers. And it's like, well, it is Tubi's fault that they don't understand the statistics that we have in our country about domestic violence and how sports and sports losses and sports wins are tied to spikes in domestic violence.
They are, yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. No, I had not heard about it.
I just heard about it yesterday because I'm on, again, the what the fuck side of TikTok.
Yeah. I mean, I usually get a fair amount of the misogynistic rebuttal TikTok and the feminist TikTok. A lot of lesbian TikTok. But then just, it's filtered in like just a ton of like puppy TikTok too. So that's like the palette.
That's nice that you get puppy TikTok. I should look at puppy hashtags more often. And then I watched the commercial because I'm like, okay, well, like, how ridiculous was it? Like, could you tell that it was a commercial and people flew off the handle? And then I watched it and I was like, well, fuck no, I would be fooled by that. It literally looked like I was trying to turn on Netflix during the game.
What was the point of it? The ad?
I guess to say that Tubi was more important than the Super Bowl. I don't know. I think the shittiest part of it is, and I don't know if it was The Notebook. My brain is telling me that it was The Notebook. I do know it was a romantic comedy or a romantic movie. So it's like, so you were setting up women and the audience for The Notebook to be the assholes during the Super Bowl. To be like, oh, we're done watching this.
Right. Well, they had to know the undertones of what that was implying, right? Like, oh, your dumb wife turned the channel.
Like, during the third quarter of the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I was trying to find it online right now, but I can't find what commercial it was. Wow. My dad was raging, wrote someone. My boyfriend thought I was the one changing the channel and began screaming at me violently, calling me things I don't even want to write down.
I think, if anything, Tubi did do a favor to the women who didn't realize that lived inside of their partners or their fathers.
That's true. Well, I mean, that can't possibly be the first violent outburst if it's over a commercial during the Super Bowl, but you never know. It could have been the wake-up call that some women needed.
Amanda, this has been lovely, and I want to thank you personally for all of the work that you're doing on toxic, but most importantly in your advocacy and domestic violence awareness, because it is an area that our country and our society, I believe, continuously fails. So I just wanted to thank you on behalf of, I guess, America, or Tubi.
Tubi. For doing what Tubi could never, which is be culturally sensitive.
Rihanna's baby. I don't know. Our trivia name last night was Rihanna's Super Bowl +1. And when someone asked me why I wanted that to be our team name, I went, because now we're baby. We're Rihanna's baby. And that would be a position I would love to be. We have we hope they're cleansing traditions onto all the men I've tolerated before. We like to offer our listeners a lesson from our experiences in the specific area of misogyny that we talked about tonight. And then we like to offer up a manifestation and a hope for a better future to put into the general energy collective so that things can and will get better. So if you were going to needlepoint on a pillow or put on a merchandise shirt your overarching lesson about misogyny and domestic violence in your work, what would it be?
Oh man, needlepoint on a pillow, like a phrase?
It can be anything. It could be a tip. It could be if you want to do an interpretive dance, I'll figure it out.
And here we go. No, gosh, there's something that I constantly say on social media when I post these things. Well, first off, is women are not safe is one of the main hashtags that I use, because I think it's important to be aware that women in this world right now are not safe, and they haven't been for a long time. But the other thing that I like to preach relentlessly about is talk to your kids. And some people, take issue with that, like, well, I have talked to my kids, or like, why is it on me to talk to my, like, well, first off, they're your kids, so you need to talk to them. But I think that would be like the main thing that I would want to preach, is that the end of toxic masculinity starts with our babies. It starts with our kids. It starts with raising them in a home where they understand what is to come as they grow up. And that's not just teaching women to be safe when they go out into the world. That's about teaching both boys and girls how to be respectful and draw boundaries and respect boundaries and earn consent and have healthy relationships and enter into any kind of relationship, whether it be romantic or friendship, with a certain amount of respect and love and admiration, and how to process feelings in a healthy manner as they grow up. And all of these things, I just think by the time that people reach adulthood, it's too late. That shit is ingrained, we can't catch them then. The best we can do is try to curb it, but like, talk to your kids, talk to them about everything. Be open, be as honest as possible.
As a teacher and as a person who has friends who are raising kids, I think 10 years old is too late. I think we really believe that we cannot talk to kids about ugly things because we assume that they do not know that ugliness exists, but they are also living in an ugly world with us. in a world where ugliness happens. So you have to be the person at least telling them, hey, that's not how I want the world to be. How about you, buddy?
Right. I truly believe that you should encourage children to make their own conclusions, because I have seen raising my two daughters that the beliefs that I hold are quickly becoming the beliefs that they hold. And I'm so sensitive to that, where I always try to introduce in conversations, this is what I believe. It doesn't have to be what you believe. But let me tell you why I believe this. And that would apply to anything from feminism to religion, where it's like, here's what I believe, but here's what some people believe. And here's what other people believe. And here's the things that people believe that I feel like are harmful. But I want you to grow up and determine what you believe is right in your heart, in your gut. I've taken my kids to, I think, 3 or 4 women's marches now and a Black Lives Matter march. And I always present to them before we go, do you want to do this? Here's what I'm marching for. Here's what we're standing up against. Do you feel like, and they're like, they were like 4 and 5 at the time. It's like, you want to do this? Like, I don't want to make you. You want to do this? Like, I really, truly want them to grow up to feel safe and say, like, I don't agree with that. And me swallow that and be like, okay, good. Tell me about it,
That's lovely too. Yeah, treating kids like people. Who would have thunk? If only I was treated like a child, like a person as a child, I'd be president. I'm pretty sure.
I mean, parenting is just, for me, it's just constantly doing things the way you wish they would have been done when you were growing up. And, I had good parents and they made some mistakes, but looking back, I can now clearly see in my 40s, like, if it would have gone a little bit different, I would have a little bit different idea about myself and my place in the world. I want to try to do that a little bit better with my kids.
I think what I'm going to hold on to is the message that you gave about advocacy and the ways you should approach being an advocate to a victim. And I think my lesson that I would like to pass on, the TLDR of it all, would be everyone can be an advocate. I tried to combine activist and advocate, but everyone can be an advocate. Take care and time to be a good one, because it won't serve your energy or anyone else's if it's performative advocacy or advocacy that makes someone feel actually more unsafe or more defensive than actually like they can come to you. So everyone can be an advocate, and it doesn't always have to be tied to dollars, but take a pause and take a beat and then go, well, how am I a good one?
Yep. Yeah, I like that. Right. It might not always be it might not always be like, well, I know what's best for you.
I'm going to pack your bag. I have been the person who has told a man to say that again, and I'm going to go pack the bag for her because my family gets fiery. And then I just started, and I just, inherited that. But now I'm going to stop and be like, before I start yelling at this man, may I consider that I'm just putting more people at risk?
Right. You go like you're in your car and just yell at him, like scream at him in your car. But I mean, we've all been there. I've been that friend before that's like, no, this is it for you. You're done now, but it doesn't often work out in that person's favor,
If you were to offer up a manifestation and a hope to the collective, what would you hope for us moving forward?
Oh man, I mean, just a safer world in general for women, for children, for trans individuals, people of color, indigenous folks, like all the groups that are constantly in the threat of danger. Like, just a safer world is what I would manifest. But like personally, like I would want to manifest more conversations like this with like smart women like yourself who just want to call it out and talk about it bluntly and not hold back and not be afraid that they might piss somebody off, or know that they're going to piss somebody off and just forge ahead anyway. That's kind of how I live life.
My red flag and my internalized trauma is that I love pissing off people. So that's how I'm toxic. But thank you for the comment.
You wanted the troll to come out.
But thank you for the compliment is what I'm trying to say. I think my hope would be that one man in maybe a senator seat would be confronted with a Chelsea Handler saying that she wants to be childless forever and that should be okay. Or an episode of Toxic where it's like, women shouldn't always be victims at alarming rates or something. And then they realize that there are women working besides them, or trans people, people of color, people who are not as privileged as this man on the senator seat, who are working alongside him and are going unheard. And he takes a step to be like, hold on, I think AOC was speaking. Because we should all be hearing AOC more. She's a real smart lady.
Yeah, she's smarter than all of us.
She's a real great lady. I would like to be AOC's baby. But yeah, we should stop calling her names on the Congress floor and instead be like, I believe AOC has her hand raised.
Has any male congressperson ever spoken up for her, spoken out for her?
If they have, I didn't see it. They're all very threatened by her.
All right, men. Who's gonna go first?
The thing that makes me sick about her situation is they don't stand up for her, and then they breed these seeds of doubt in her to where the people who would benefit from her being listened to the most are also turning against her and being like, oh, she's just performative and she's just stirring things up and all of it. And I would like her to be queen. I would just like her to wipe everything up and be queen of the world. Just, I guess Napoleon is what I'm hoping for her future. In a nicer version, in a nicer white pantsuit. Tell everyone where they can find Toxic and connect with you and all of your resources. This has been such a healing and wonderful episode, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you. They can find Toxic anywhere you listen to podcasts, or toxicthepodcast.com if you want to get a direct link to us. And then I am the editor over at domesticshelters.org, which is the first online directory of domestic violence shelters across the country. So all you have to do is enter your zip code, and you can find a shelter near you, and that will be staffed with an advocate, usually 24/7 to talk to. So
awesome.
And there's like tons of resources. I've written thousands and thousands of articles about domestic violence. So anything you could possibly ever want to know about it.
I keep trying to tell people that if they stop paying attention to the bad parts of the internet, they'd find the good parts. Like, if y'all would turn off Joe Rogan, you might find a resource. But don't let me tell you what to do.
Right. Just keep on going.
That's right. Tolerated, you know the drill, because I put a little plug at the end that I pre-recorded about all of the ways to find us online and to support us through the Patreon and our merchandise. And I just want to remind you, and also remember, that you don't have to smile through anything you are tolerating, including a society, a culture, and a political system that is very aware that you are a victim at alarming rates, and they're just not fucking putting policies ahead of that game. Smiles are for joy. Hi, everyone. Thank you for checking out this week's episode. I wanted to jump on and offer a small reminder of the ways that you can connect with us. The first way is our socials. So we are Men I've Tolerated Pod on Instagram and Natalie K124 on TikTok, my personal Instagram. And you can find us on YouTube and Pinterest under To All the Men I've Tolerated Before. The second way is by becoming a Patreon member. We are well on our way to our 25 member Patreon, where we are going to unlock bonus
perks to being a patron member. Shout out to all of our existing patrons. As an independently ran and funded podcast, your support means everything. Another way that you can connect with us is making sure to subscribe and leave comments wherever you can so we can start reading reviews on each podcast episode. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure to check out the merch store, and we will see you next week.